Hi, I'm Cathy Olds, and I'm the coordinator of spiritual direction at the Franciscan Renewal Center in Scottsdale, and I also am a spiritual director at St. Bridget's in Mesa. And we've had a number of questions from folks about the origins of spiritual direction, whether it's Catholic or not. So we thought we'd do this video to explain a bit about where spiritual direction comes from, how it has been a part of our spiritual tradition for centuries. And we start clear at the beginning. Of course, Jesus is our first and most important spiritual director. And he, according to the Gospels, was one who not only cared about the crowds that followed him, but was also concerned about the individuals. So spiritual direction is about bringing the individual closer to God, listening for how God's Spirit is working in that person's life. And Jesus was such a master at that. So as his followers, we hope to help one another live our Christian life in the day-to-day world. So Jesus is our first spiritual director, and he would have been a rabbi, a teacher, and that was one of the roles of rabbis in his time, was to act as spiritual directors for their community or their village. We also in the New Testament see that St. Paul writes to individuals as well as some of the Christian communities that he founded, and gives spiritual advice to individuals. And his work was about teaching Christianity and how we are to live Christianity in the day-to-day, which again is very much what spiritual direction does. We believe that the Christian church, or we know that the Christian church in that first century and even into the second century was very much a community that was defined by the words of Jesus and the death and resurrection of Jesus as communicated by his disciples and apostles. But we also know that the Christian community lived in a very pagan culture, a very hostile culture. Christianity was seen as very countercultural. So part of the work of Christians living in the world was to share the gospel with others, which could be a dangerous thing, of course, and what they came to call the victory of martyrdom. So martyrdom was a real possibility throughout the first and second and into the third century. So part of what we understand about spiritual direction is that this is a community that needs support and needs individuals that can help teach and mentor and help the community understand what God is calling them to. So in the early Christian communities, as today, the spiritual director is always the Spirit of God. So our role as spiritual directors is to listen for that Spirit of God in a person's life, in the things that happen to them, in their relationships. And that would have been the same for people of the first century in those Christian communities. This was a lay church. This was not a church run by clergy. The clergy had a role of supporting the community, of helping feed the community and care for the needs of the community and lead worship for the community. But they were not really about telling people how to live their day-to-day life. They were holy people, but the holiness was not just the job of the clergy.